Hey, Pete Moore here from TechMyStressAway.com. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at brute force attacks. So I'm going to be talking about what a brute force attack is. We're going to look at defending against a brute force attack. And then we're going to I'm going to give you a demo of a simple attack on a WordPress website. So I thought it might be useful so you can see it from an attacker's point of view, what that kind of looks like, or a simple version of it. And then in the last part, we're going to be looking at some security plugins that have brute force protection as part of their settings. So what is a brute force attack? Well, it's simply a trial and error process of obtaining information, usually in an automated way. So in terms of WordPress, an attack may be performed on the login page to try and guess the administrator login details to take control of the site. Now this might make a bit more sense when we actually perform the attack, but I just kind of wanted to give you an overview. Before we get into defending, I do want to point out that this video isn't meant to scare anyone. My personal experience is that brute force attacks don't really happen too often. Now, we manage quite a number of sites, which some of them are our own, and obviously we do client sites as well. And to be totally honest, I've seen very little evidence of brute force attacks actually taking place. And believe me, I spend a lot of time looking at logs and stuff like that just to see what's happening on websites. So I do think that it may be blown out of proportion by maybe some of the security plugins that kind of obviously want to sell their pro versions, but obviously we still need to kind of just make sure that our website is defending against these kind of attacks should it occur. So I've listed a few different things that we can cover. The first point is the administrator account, to only use that for admin only purposes. Now I see this regularly where a WordPress user will have one account for everything on their WordPress site, and a little later when I come to the actual demo, I'll show you why it can be not a good thing to do to just have one account for everything. Because basically by default, WordPress doesn't hide usernames, so that's not uncommon. If you think about your email accounts or maybe social media accounts, their usernames are freely available. So especially like social media, and if someone knows your email address, then they know your username for your email account. So it's not uncommon. Now the second point is a strong and unique password. Now for me, this is probably the most important thing, because even though a brute force attack might affect resources on your website, if you actually have a strong and unique password, it's extremely difficult to successfully carry out a brute force attack. Because if you think you had a 12 character password, which is what I'd say is kind of the minimum, and it had a mixture of uppercase, lowercase, numbers and symbols, then it's going to take a long time to actually crack a password that long. And also if it's unique, as in the sense of unique to you, so you don't use that password anywhere else, but also that it's not a password that's kind of been involved in a breach somewhere. Now if you have a look at Have I Been Pwned, that you can actually test your password to all their kind of known passwords in the database. I have done a video on Have I Been Pwned, so you can kind of find that if you want to have a look at that. But if you just go to haveibeenpwned.com website, you'll easily find where you can check passwords. The third point is actually hiding the login page, so that might be via a captcha. Authentication, which would be another username and password. Now in most circumstances, for most people, that's probably not an option. They don't really want to be logging in twice. And the last one is moving the actual login page, which is possible in WordPress. Now that is a bit of a security through obscurity technique, so that's not always particularly useful. And the last one is blocking IP addresses after failed logins, and again we'll be looking at some plugins, some security plugins that kind of handle that for you. Okay, let's have a look at the actual demonstration of a simple brute force attack. Now on the screen you can see a WordPress website. Now this isn't live on the internet, this is actually installed on my laptop, so you won't actually be able to visit this website. It's just for demonstration purposes obviously. And some of the other things I'm going to be kind of going through, I don't want you to worry about too much about some of the tools that I use. This is really just for you to get an idea of how easy these kind of attacks can be, can take place. And obviously with any kind of hacking tools, they can be used for good, as in like checking a website security to find, to help kind of secure it. And obviously it can be used for malicious purposes where people actually try to break into websites. So it's not about the tools. I just kind of want you to see what it may look like from an attacking point of view. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a tool called WP Scan. And what that will do is it will bring us back information on the target website. So that's WP Victim here. So if I actually log into this website, there's a couple of things I kind of just want to show you. So if you've got a WordPress website, you'll be familiar with the actual WordPress login page that you can see here. So when we're carrying out a brute force attack, what's happening is that it's going to be entering a username and obviously trying to guess the password. So what we'll have is a list of passwords and it'll just keep trying to log in. So like I said before, a brute force attack is quite noisy because there's going to be a lot of activity as it goes through the passwords. The passwords generally that people might use are like common passwords. You can find lists of common passwords around the internet. I'm going to be using a very basic one, and obviously it actually contains the correct password, just so I can kind of show you what a successful brute force attack can look like. If I just bring up my little notepad, we'll see here, this is the username and password. And we've got a nice strong password. Okay, so we're in the WordPress dashboard. Now, if we look at the site here, and if we look at the users, we can see we've got an admin account and we've also got an author account. Now, if you're not familiar, WordPress does have a number of different roles, so it gives you different capabilities. So obviously an administrator can do everything on the site. An author who can only kind of like publish content and stuff like that. So it's probably useful for you to kind of get used to different roles. Now, as I mentioned before, we really want to be having an administrator account for actual admin purposes only. And when we actually use the tool that I'm going to be using next, we're going to see that we can bring back the username for both of these accounts. Now, it is possible to actually stop what's called enumeration of the user IDs, and that only really works on accounts that are not like publicly accessible. So if we kind of, let me just show you here, it might make more sense. If we see here, this is like the demo kind of post that comes with all basic WordPress installations, and we'll see here that we've got an author link. Now this links to the author page, and this gives us the actual author user ID. So if you use one account to publish content and do admin and stuff like that, there's going to be no way of hiding this. So you're always going to be giving away your kind of user ID. Now, it will still do this if you don't use any kind of security plugin to kind of stop enumeration of these user IDs. I'm going to try and not confuse you. It's going to make more sense in a minute when I actually use the tool. So if we do that now, it might make a bit more sense. So what we're going to be using is a tool called WP Scan, and this will give us lots of information about this website. Now, it's not really important for you to understand what's going on here. This is just saying that WP Scan is the tool we're using. This is the target URL, obviously our website here. Detection mode is mixed, so it's going to do some passive and aggressive techniques to try and get information about the website. This clear cache just means it's just going to clear the cache from previous kind of things that I've done before. And then the important bit here is this -EU. So this basically is enumerating usernames. Now, if we actually run this now, we'll see what kind of information WP Scan brings back to us. So I'll just let this complete and then I'll kind of just have a quick walkthrough. Like I said, this isn't really important for you to kind of understand what's going on. But just for those that are kind of interested, what we can see here is it's telling us the version of everything on the server, so the operating system, the version of PHP. Now this might not mean anything to yourself, but to an attacker this is information that is going to be quite useful at some point. So if we carry on going through it, we'll see it identifies the version of WordPress. Now this is the latest one when I'm recording this. If this was an older version, this would be useful information for an attacker to kind of say, you know, this is the version of WordPress using. Is there any known vulnerabilities for that version? So they can start having a look around the net to see if there's any vulnerabilities. But also, if there was a vulnerability known, WP scan would actually tell you in this scan. So you wouldn't have to really do much legwork to find out information. It also tells us the theme that's being used on the site. Now, if we carry on going down, we'll see here, this is where it starts enumerating the users. So it's using passive and aggressive methods. And as we can see, it's actually telling us there's an author account and a site admin. So these are the actual usernames. So it's telling us these two users are on this WordPress site. Now, if we go to the actual, back to here, we'll see that's correct. User ID of site admin and author. So this is half of the kind of halfway into the access just from this information alone. So now we're left to kind of trying to find out what the passwords are for this. Now this is obviously telling us site admin, so that is going to be the kind of account that we're going to target as attackers, because obviously we want to try and get into admin. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually perform the scan where the brute force takes place. And if we look at this here, this is the list that I'm going to be using. So obviously very basic passwords, and then we're going to actually put in the actual correct password. Now obviously in real life terms, if you had a password like this, it would have to be absolutely massive list to actually reach that kind of password. So as I said, you know, you're talking, I don't even know how many combinations. I'm sure you can try and find out for even if it was a 12-character password, how long or how many combinations there are of that password, how many combinations of characters for that password. But believe me, it's a long time to actually crack this kind of length of password. Let me just grab the command. And again, what I'll do is I'll just quickly talk through kind of what's going on. So what we've got here, again, we've got our WP scan command URL. This time I'm just going to do a passive detection mode. Now the user ID, so this -u for user, is site admin, because obviously we know that from here. And then we're going to give it a list of passwords, so that's this test WP or test PW, sorry, list.txt. And then the kind of attack we're going to be performing is a password attack on the WP login page. So if I set that off, we'll see what information that brings back. So as you can see here, this is where it's kind of performed the password attack, and then it's told us that there's a valid combination of site admin and password. So that's our basic brute force attack. So, you know, I hope you can kind of see how kind of, you know, easy it is to do these kind of things. Now, like I said, obviously it's not easy in the sense of getting the correct password, but if you're using not very good passwords, you are potentially making it easy for people. Now, the last thing we're going to kind of look at is some of the plugins that are available. So I've got 3 installed on here, and we've got iThemes Security, Ninja Firewall and WordFence Security. Now WordFence and iThemes are extremely popular, so if you're watching this video, there may be a chance you're actually already using one of these two. Ninja Firewall is my personal favourite, and that's the one that I tend to use, but I'm not going to kind of go into why now. I'll probably do a video on Ninja Firewall at some point. Now if I just activate all these plugins, we can kind of look at the settings that each one kind of offers in the sense of brute force protection. So the first one I'll look at is the iTheme security. So if we go to this security here, settings, we'll see that iThemes offer two forms of brute force protection. Now if I scroll down and find them, we'll see here we've got local brute force protection. So if I enable that and then go into configure settings, so if we go in here, we can see that we've got a number of options. We've got a max login attempt per host, a max login attempt per user. So if that was a valid username, it'd give you 10 attempts and then it would lock you out. So you can really kind of go through, each one. If you're not using one at the moment, if you're already using one, then you can look into more what each thing does. I just kind of wanted to give you some options. And then what it does here is how many minutes to remember a bad login. So it'll basically lock someone out for 5 minutes. And then also what we can do is we can actually immediately ban a host that attempts to log in using admin. Now, if you ever see anyone using admin to try and access it, then they're probably not very talented at hacking because that's an extremely basic attack. That's pretty much it for that one there. They also do have a network brute force protection. Now what that will do, will actually use the iThemes network for different attackers that have been banned on other sites. So you kind of use the force of the whole network of iThemes. Like I said, I'm not going to go into details of everything. You can kind of look into it if you want. Now the next one we're going to look at is my favorite, which is Ninja Firewall. Now, this is, I think last time I looked, it was only about 30,000 active installs, which is, for this, in terms of plugins, that's quite a low number of users. And I can see why it can put a lot of people off, because there are a lot of options and probably overwhelming for most people. But this is what I like about it, is it does give you kind of full control over things. Now, if we go into firewall options, actually it's in login protection. Now we can see here you can enable the brute force protection, and it gives us a few different options. So it asks us what type of protection we want, so we can use username and password like I said before. So what will happen is if someone tries to access, or even yourself, if you try to access the login page, it'll pop up another login box that you have to fill in first. And like I previously mentioned, that's not always a convenient way of doing things. So I tend to go for a capture image, which again, that will still kind of cover the login screen, but you just have to fill in a simple capture. But what you can also do is you can actually enable protection, so it's either always enabled, so every time you go to the login page it's enabled, or you can just enable it when it's under attack. And what we can do here, the default is post. So generally when someone's trying to access a site, they're making a post request, so they're actually sending the username and password to the website. So that's what a post is. A get is when you're kind of retrieving information from a website. So the default is post, which is fine. And then we can say how long to enable protection for. So remember, it's only going to come on when it's actually under attack. So this is for 5 minutes. And if there's more than 8 post requests made in a 15-second period, so you could, if you're seeing that you are getting locked out, it might be that this maybe is too low. You could increase it. But generally, if you're making 8 post requests in 15 seconds, that's generally going to be some kind of bot doing that, because you're not going to log in 8 times in 15 seconds, or it's very unlikely. And then there's a few different bot protection things that we can kind of do down here. So that's the Ninja Firewall one. And if we look at WordFence, which is probably the most popular security plugin, if we go into all options, and then they have a brute force section. If we just find that, there it is here. That's under firewall options, and then you can turn that on. And then what this does here is it asks you, you can lock out after how many login failures. So you could do 20, you could lower it. They do have more information on different settings, and the kind of recommended ones. So you can look at that if you do use WordFence. Also, they can lock out how many forgot password attempts. So say a hacker tried to manipulate the forget password link, you could lock that after 20 attempts, or kind of however many you want. You can change that. You can also choose what period of time the account failures are covered over. So 4 hours, again, change it to whatever you want. Also, the amount of time that the person who has failed to log in is locked out for, that can be changed. And also you can immediately lock out invalid users. So a bit like the one that iThemes did, you could put admin, or if you start seeing a lot of someone trying a particular username that doesn't exist, you could add that to your list. So I hope you kind of found this useful. If you have any questions or you have any comments or anything like that, obviously you can put it in the comments below. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.